Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Nutanix Hyperconverged Ask Me Anything, where hopefully we're going to have a lot of questions this morning. My name is Mike Dent. I'm the Director of Datacenter Architecture for eGroup, and I'll be leading this webinar this morning. So hopefully you came prepared with a lot of questions. If not, I am going to go through some random stories just to make this an interesting time for everybody. So we're going to jump in. We got 30 minutes. Hopefully we get some questions. If not, I've prepared some. This should be fun. So who is eGroup? For those of you joining that don't know who eGroup is, we are a services organization founded in 1999. We are located in Charleston, South Carolina, beautiful on the coast, great place to have to visit, great place to have to work. We've been delivering successful outcomes, both in the hardware, software, cloud, on-premise, you name it, world for the last 2 decades. Across a wide variety of geographies and industries. We don't specifically focus in one general area. We like to take our talents and skills where the customers need us most. We're privately owned, a debt-free business, and we're pretty much made up of 3 really focus areas, right? The cloud services, which is going to be your really cloud-focused solution area, Microsoft Azure specifically, anything in the Microsoft Azure world. Data center infrastructure, so that's going to be your traditional data center, your 4 walls, your buildings, wherever you're running your compute storage today, and really the hybrid approach to that, and integrating that with our cloud services. And then finally, our managed services team, which is going to be your service desk, your kind of augmentation to your own staff. So really made up of 3 different areas. As I said, we've got national and international solutions delivery experience. I think we're in 45 or 40, somewhere in the 40s of the 50 states right now that we've got currently active customers or have done work previously. So we have a decent wide geography, and over 300 customers across that geography as well. And like I said, multiple different areas: legal, higher ed, manufacturing. Again, we don't focus in one specific silo or one specific area across the board. Just kind of throw little chest thumping real quick for us. Some of our recent recognition. The one I want to start with most of them that I'm personally the most proud of, leading our data center team, is that we are again a Nutanix Cloud Champion partner. We were one of the early Nutanix master partners, and we continue to really be able to focus in on everything that Nutanix does across their spectrum. We're multiple Microsoft National Gold partner, and you can see the rest of our recognition. I'm not going to go through each of those, but the goal here, or really the mindset behind this is we like to deliver solutions with speed and certainty to our customers, right? Both data center and cloud. We say that a lot, but what does that really mean? It really means bringing simple solutions that make sense for a business, that help you transform, not just selling you things. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into some of this. Again, at the outset, I told you I lead our data center architecture team, which pretty much is a team focused on all your traditional data center technology, storage, compute, network, security, everything that goes into that. But as well as we're really starting to focus on what we can do that simplifies the hybrid solutions as well. What we can do that brings our on-premise solutions and integrates those very well to the cloud. And Nutanix is part of that journey for a lot of our customers, is bringing that cloud capability that we see with Microsoft Azure, with AWS, with GCP, back on-prem, right? So the simple solutions of expandability, of quick solutions to deliver, of quick kind of turnarounds for products, things like that. So Nutanix is really that foundation for us. So questions. This is the fun part. So I'm going to keep an eye on the questions poll, the questions in our chat, and as you have questions or specific topics around Nutanix, this can be anything. This is an Ask Me Anything. Anything under the Nutanix world or hyperconverged in general is fair game here. So as questions pop in, I will start to go over some of them and try to answer them as we can. Hopefully it's a little rapid fire. If not, I've got some questions on the slides that I've already taken from some of our attendees that are going to run the gamut of a wide variety of areas, right? So we're going to go ahead and jump through these. If you do have questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat and I will tackle those. First one. This is a good one. I think it's an open-ended question that really can go down many different rabbit holes, right? What is hyperconverged infrastructure? We've said this for years. We've had hyper-converged infrastructure, we've had converged infrastructure, we've had three-tier infrastructure, we've had mainframe infrastructure. What does it really all mean, right? And a lot of this comes back to simplicity. What does hyper-converged infrastructure mean? But more so, what does it mean for me as a business, right? It's easy, it makes an easy transformation from a very difficult or cumbersome solution back to something that's very simple, right? So what we're talking about with hyperconverged is something that really streamlines the operation. And that by that operation, I mean the deployment, the management, and just everything else that goes with data center resources. Scaling is a big one that I think hyperconverged really tackles better than any of the other solutions we've ever seen, right? If I need to add hardware, if I need to add storage, if I need to add compute, a lot of times I'm having to look at this in disparate solutions. I need to add storage, so I have to look at my storage. Then if I need to add compute, I have to look at my compute and so forth, right? I'm looking at different areas. With hyperconverged, though, I've got the ability to really focus right in on what I need to expand, what I need to scale with, but at a very simple level because it's all software defined. The hardware doesn't matter under the hood. I can scale independently of compute. I can scale independently of storage, at the same time still providing the value across the board to my consumers being the business. I'm going to stop right here because we had a question pop in, so this is going to be fun. Let's see. Question we have: how would running AHV benefit you versus running a different hypervisor? Great question, right? One of the things Nutanix specifically offers, and if you haven't seen this in Nutanix, AHV specifically is the Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor, which is their branded hypervisor, right? So we think of VMware, we think of Hyper-V, think of Zen Server, KVM, et cetera, et cetera. Nutanix has what's called AHV, the Acropolis hypervisor. So what would it benefit? And that's a great question, right? When we look at kind of the hypervisor market, it's dominated by VMware, and VMware has been able to capitalize on that by having some high costs, right? If we look at what you pay for VMware today, and I think this is kind of considered across all customers, is if I look at your licensing from VMware perspective, you're probably paying for 25%, or excuse me, you're using 25% of what you're paying for actually, right? When we look at all these customers that now, Enterprise Plus is kind of the standard level of licensing VMware's pushing you to. There's a lot of features and functionality in there. Virtual, distributed switches, fault tolerance, and a lot of other things that you're probably never going to use unless you have a very specific reason to. Fault tolerance, I think, is the biggest one. Get a lot of questions around what can I do with fault tolerance, and honestly, in going back to the 2.5 days of VMware that I've been working with, I've never seen a customer actually running fault tolerance into a production environment. So why AHV? And it circles back to the Nutanix story, right? It circles back to freedom of choosing how you're going to run your environment. Freedom of choosing what hardware I'm going to run with Nutanix, choosing the hypervisor I'm going to choose. The fact that every Nutanix node ships, and there's little quotes around that, every Nutanix node that ships that's an NX branded or that's some of their OEM partners, ships with the Acropolis hypervisor already pre-installed on it. So we're already cutting down on our time from order to ship to deployment to value, right? We've got this ability to go day one, have a hypervisor that's providing us exactly what we need with no cost. And of course, that no cost means I've bought the Nutanix gear, I've bought the hardware. It's implemented day one. So it really cuts back on the overhead of licensing and maintenance costs over the course of time with VMware. And again, this is not a knock against VMware. VMware has done amazing things for the hypervisor over the course of the last 15, 20 years. But at some point, there's got to be a better option, or maybe not a better option, a different option. If I can get something that's going to provide me 95% of what I need without having some high costs, to me, that's the biggest benefit of AHV. And you've also got the ecosystem that AHV is coming with, right? If I look at what VMware has done, they've not done a lot in the last couple of years. They've moved the needle a little bit, but AHV is starting to simplify the hypervisor for us. Single pane of glass management for the entire stack, single pane of glass management across multiple clusters for my VMs, things that we've kind of come to expect, but they do it in a different and fresh way. Hopefully that kind of answers the question around why AHV. It's simple, right? If you're a VMware shop, you're 95% of the way there of understanding how to do doing AHV. If you buy Nutanix, it comes out of the blocks with AHV already pre-installed. So again, it's time to value and time to deploy, I think, are two of the biggest benefits that we've got. Another question, in my opinion, well, that's going to be a long one. What makes Nutanix different from the other HCI vendors? Interesting question. Again, I think a lot of it circles back to freedom. Freedom of choice for a hypervisor, freedom of choice for hardware, freedom of choice for a lot of things, right? If I look at the Dell EMC offering of VxRail, it's a good solution, but I'm tied to a specific hardware. I'm tied to a specific kind of ecosystem. I'm tied to vSAN. I'm tied to things that are now introduced at multiple kind of decoupled points still. Let's be fair. VxRail is still not necessarily an integrated system. You got your ESXi host, you've got VxRail Manager, you've got Log Insight, you've got vCenter, you've got vSAN, you've got a bunch of different touch points. And when you sit down to do a VxRail upgrade, even though it's somewhat simple to be able to click through VxRail Manager to kick off an upgrade, it is still multiple steps. It's still multiple touch points of a environment upgrade that at some point something could go wrong, something could kind of go sideways, but it's and that kind of locks you into that. Now, granted, you can choose your specific hardware, right? You don't have to be on Dell hardware for vSAN, but again, to get into the HCI world, that is the VxRail, VxBlock, those things that are kind of tied to a specific vendor, one ecosystem, and that's it. HPE with SimpliVity, kind of the same thing. Cisco with HyperFlex, again, same thing. There's a little bit of flexibility on freedom of choice there from a hypervisor perspective. Maybe it's not just VMware, maybe we can get some Hyper-V, but again, I'm not locked into one vendor that's doing everything for me. I have the ability to pick and choose what I start with today and where I go tomorrow. We've got a lot of customers that start with Nutanix that are VMware shops, and they say, I want to stay on VMware because it's what I know for right now, but a year or two down the road, I'm very interested in what the Acropolis hypervisor can give me. There is no lift and shift. There's nothing I've got to buy or do. I've got the ability to convert that cluster on the fly to Acropolis hypervisor, right? So now I've got the ability to dynamically change my entire organization from a cost and simplicity perspective with choosing to go over to AHV. So that's where I think Nutanix really separates itself. It's the software side that they have provided, but giving you the opportunity to pick and choose your hypervisor and your hardware at that given time, right? We're seeing that become more of a trend elsewhere in backup solutions, things like that. But Nutanix has really led that charge with that freedom of choice across the spectrum of hardware and software as it pertains to the hardware, the platform that I run it on, and the hypervisor that I choose to use today and tomorrow, right? So hopefully that those two questions. Thanks for dropping those in there. What is hyperconverged infrastructure? Circle back on that. It's a simple definition, right? It's taking the best things we've always had with 3-tier, right? Solid solutions, performance that, if we look at kind of what a 3-tier solution gave me is I always needed the utmost performance. So I had to buy the best storage array. I had to buy the best compute, the best network. And I start to cram that down into a very small footprint without losing any of those performance functions, right? I can take everything that I've been doing for years of how I measure performance and take that into a very simple footprint, but also give my teams time back in the day to be able to look at other areas that they can benefit and help move the business forward. All right, keep those questions coming. What's the difference between hyperconverged and converged? And I think this is a very interesting one because this one got muddied for many, many years, right? So with, if you look at kind of that converged infrastructure, VCE has done a really good job of really hyping and touting the converged infrastructure. When I look at a converged infrastructure, what is it, right? It's a rack. If you look at a converged infrastructure today from the folks that are selling converged infrastructure, pretty much we're talking about you're getting a rack. And let's look, VxBlock for specifically in this case. What are you getting with a converged infrastructure from VCE and VxBlock? You're getting probably some Cisco servers. You're getting some Cisco switches, maybe some Cisco fiber switches, maybe a EMC Unity or a PowerMax array, So all of a sudden now I've listed 3 different areas that have 3 different management touch points, if not more. Add in the hypervisor, the management of those hypervisors. So now we're up to 5 or 6, right? So Converged is a very nice picture if you're looking for very specific workload utilization or very specific needs for that, right? It's managed pretty well, right? If we look at kind of a VX block, everything is in lockstep from a code perspective. So if you're going to upgrade your PowerMax array, your UCS blades have to be on this version and so forth. And everything's kind of kept in lockstep. But that doesn't give you any flexibility, right? You're always bound to specific versions. You're always bound to specific workloads. You're always bound to doing things very systematically across that. Hyperconverged, though, on the other hand, kind of flips that, right? It takes that and shrinks it down, right? We go from the rack to the multiple U's, right? So if I look at solutions that might take a rack's worth of space and a rack worth of kind of management components, I can do that with Nutanix in the hyperconverged world, or maybe 2 or 4 U, right? I'm crunching that down, simplifying that, right? I think one way to kind of put it is you know, and kind of reading this because I thought this was a good quote. Converged infrastructure is like a fruit salad. All the pieces of fruit can be together or separated from each other. With HCI, the pieces aren't integrated and can't be broken apart, more like, say, a smoothie. I think that kind of lets you understand the difference between the two is when you get hyperconverged infrastructure, everything's prepared, everything's ready to go for you, and you don't need to worry about picking and choosing your different parts. Now, again, that kind of flies in the face of what I said about Nutanix with some of their freedom of choice, right? I can still pick and choose my flavors that go into my smoothie, but I'm not having to keep that smoothie separated, which is the converged architecture, and say, here's my fruit, here's my yogurt, here's my milk, here's my all this stuff, and I never get to put those things together. So very similar, right? When we look at what these things, when we look at the differences between the two, but ultimately hyperconverged really turns around back to that simplicity perspective. Just checking my time here. Come on, questions, if you got them, bring them on. How can HCI simplify my IT operations? This is another kind of interesting question that I think anybody who's gone down the road with Nutanix can really testify to this one, right? So how can it simplify my operations? Well, again, one thing is time. Time is a big thing that we have a finite amount of, right? We don't have nobody's got, hours upon hours in the day to just waste time or kind of handle different things. So what is HCI really providing me is time back in my day. Going from the ability to think about how I'm going to do this upgrade. This upgrade is going to take me weeks to get through. I've got to upgrade these different components and make sure I'm not worrying about downtime and fit this into different windows. From a simplicity perspective with HCI and specifically with Nutanix, being able to have one-click hypervisor upgrades, being able to have one-click solution upgrades that's going to upgrade my the entire platform, whether it's the Nutanix software stack, the controller VMs, the firmware on the actual nodes to the hypervisor, whether that's ESXi or whether that's AHV, all within a single pane of glass and a single click. Again, simplicity is key. So really, how does HCI simplify my operations? Take aside the cooling, the heating, the infrastructure components, right? Power simplifies that because I'm shrinking my footprint. Cooling, shrinking my footprint. Again, I don't need as much cooling to maintain because I don't have a large amount of infrastructure. Those are the infrastructure pieces, right? So there's a benefit there. Simplifies my operations by just being able to collapse my footprint, not needing as much. But from the IT side is providing your staff the ability to focus on other things throughout the day. A great story of this, I think, that I'll use is we do a lot of work in the public safety field and specifically with Nutanix. And what we've been able to provide for public safety customers, you can imagine, 911 customers don't have downtime. They cannot say, we're not going to accept the 911 call for the next hour while we go through and we upgrade our solution, right? We upgrade our systems. That doesn't happen. It cannot happen. But what we've been able to do is take the Nutanix platform and provide a very simple solution to these customers that don't have two things. They don't have downtime windows, so they've got to be able to manage upgrades and operations seamlessly and without any impact to the end users. And a lot of times they also don't have IT staff. They don't have a team of storage admins and compute admins and network admins managing their infrastructure, managing their time. They've got the one guy, right? And so how can HCI simplify my operations? Is it helps that one guy get through his day, but still provide time back in his day. It allows him to be able to systematically and safely upgrade the solution with Nutanix without any downtime, without any impact to end users. So how can it simplify my IT operations? There's a lot of different ways it can. But the one thing I'd say that really I prefer to think about for my customers in this case is that it's going to simplify exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's going to give you time back in your day to be able to focus elsewhere in the business and provide value extended there, not just heads down trying to get through an upgrade that's going to take me 1 or 2 weeks. What makes up a converged infrastructure? Or, excuse me, hyperconverged infrastructure. It's still everything we expect with converged infrastructure. It's still everything we expect with legacy 3-tier infrastructure, right? You've got your compute. Hyperconverged infrastructure with Nutanix, we're using commodity hardware. We're using, you get to choose your vendor of choice from a hardware perspective. The compute that goes in there, again, standard Intel CPUs, standard memory, things like that. But what we don't have to worry about with converged infrastructure are the expensive components that go in those. Simplicity, for example, with their accelerator cards for their hyperconverged solution. With Nutanix, it's very commodity. It's very simple, the hardware that we need to do this, right? So what makes up the hyperconverged infrastructure? We've still got our storage. Storage in this case is all local drives, right? Think back to 10, 20 years ago. When you built a server, you put a bunch of drives in that server, and that's what it was prior to merging or venturing over to the SAN. We've got the ability with hyperconverged and Nutanix now to be able to provide data locality that is key. So now all of my VMs run from the drives on the node that they are on, removing all network latency, removing any overhead I've got on the network, whether it's iSCSI or fiber channel, things like that. It keeps everything local. So what makes up the hyperconverged infrastructure? We circle back to, it's an appliance concept, right? We want to simplify this down to as simple as it can be. We've still got our network connectivity. Yes, network's never going to go away. But now what we've been able to do is collapse the SAN, collapse the NAS, collapse everything that kind of make up these components outside, and really collapse that down into a single appliance perspective. So a new question popped in. Let's see how we're doing on time. We got 6 minutes, all right. How can we take advantage of Nutanix data protection in conjunction with our current backup environment? What does data protection provide in my current backup? Oh, interesting question. I think it's a good segue there. So data protection, I don't think that, and I'd probably be able to talk about this one, and if I had more time, I'd probably be able to give 2 opinions of it. Data protection provides you the value of being able to know that I've got local capabilities for a restore. And the way I position this for a lot of customers is data protection is not ever going to be a replacement for backups, right? If I've got to take the scenario, I've got a single Nutanix cluster, data protection is great for giving me that local capability for snapshots and quick restores, whether that's a VM restore, whether that's a file level restore, right? So intra-cluster, within the same cluster. Let's use it that way. Backups, of course, give me a long-term retention. So I don't ever see backups being replaced by data protection. But at the same time, things that backups are really good at is that long-term retention. Well, that takes space. I don't always want to have to size my clusters out to be able to retain data for months upon months upon months, right? I want to be able to focus in my cluster on exactly what I need today with a little bit of growth and scale as needed, and not have a bunch of wasted space. So what I use data protection for, when I like to kind of talk this with customers, is you'll never replace your backup solution with data protection. But where the backup solution is going to give you is the extra capacity for long-term. Data protection gives me the here and now protection. If I can go to use data protection to restore a VM or restore files from yesterday or the day before, or even maybe a week, right? I can do that much faster than having to go back to a backup. But at the same time, data protection also provides me the ability to replicate to another Nutanix cluster, right? So we see that with things like Zerto, we see that with things like SRM for years, right? Or even Recover Point, right? Native data protection built into the platform. built into the Nutanix solution gives me a number of things, right? It gives me the protection locally, gives me the protection remotely, and vice versa. Out of the box, I have one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many. I can kind of move, I can make my disaster recovery plans match what I think my organization needs, rather than being locked into taking a backup, having that backup replicated to another site, trying to restore that backup, things like that, right? So I think the two are very, they're complementary to each other. But I think data protection gives me, again, it gives me that here and now focus, and gives me the ability to really kind of hone in exactly what my organization needs from a data protection standpoint. I don't mean to use data protection twice there, but from a data protection perspective, not just backing up, but from replication. So the key there with data protection with Nutanix is it's the data protection locally and data protection remotely. So, and of course, there's two different types of data protection with Nutanix. One is going to be your kind of data protection through Prism, and one is going to be the data protection through Leap, right? With Xi Leap. And that's going to be a little different area, right, where we can kind of use both or one or the other and kind of protect our environments through a variety of ways. One's built in, one's got an additional licensing cost, but they each provide value in both cases. Let's see, we're running through time here, so let's see if oh, there's a good one. What does HCI have to do with cloudifying my data center, right? If I look at kind of this, the response to this question is, think of what you can do with the cloud, right? You don't need to know what hardware's out there. You don't need to know how it's provisioned or anything like that. You can go in and click a button and say, I need 20 VMs, and they're going to spin up. Nutanix and hyperconverged infrastructure really start to provide that leverage by saying, buy what you need now, right? I think back to about 15 years ago, I was working at a hospital, and we were expanding our EMR system. And we went out and we said, we've got to have the ability to have a primary and disaster recovery data center, and we need storage, replication, and things like that. We were an IBM shop at the time, and we bought this IBM array that had 90% more capacity than we actually needed. But they said, oh, well, you guys are going to grow into it, and when you start replicating, you're going to need more here and there. And after 3 or 4 years, we were 15% utilized total. Now, like, you guys are going to grow into it, right? This is the cloudifying of your data center, right? It's the ability to dynamically scale when you need to without having a lot of wasted resources, right? I don't have to go out and buy something that I'm going to be over leveraged for the next 5 or 6 years, hoping I'm going to grow into this. It allows me to very systematically know, here's what I need to buy on day 1, here's what I need to buy on day 100, here's what I need to buy on year 2. But at the same time, having the flexibility with Nutanix to say, and I had this conversation with a customer yesterday, I buy my Nutanix nodes today, and 3 or 5 years when I go to refresh, I don't want to have to buy 3 more nodes or 5 more nodes to refresh what I've got. And that's the beauty of cloudifying this environment, is the fact that in 3 years, instead of having to buy all new nodes, I can buy one and roll it in and kind of systematically roll one by one by one over the course of the next couple of years until I've done a full refresh, and have that ability of dynamically growing, but also dynamically kind of refreshing when I need to. I think we are coming right to the top of the half hour, so we're going to jump through these. Wanted to give a plug. Thank you for joining us today, by the way. Hopefully you found this interesting. It's kind of fun to, I was preferring kind of a rapid fire questions, just kind of game show style, but maybe next time. November 5th, if you've been following eGroup, we've been doing these webinars multiple times a month on different subject matters and different areas. So on Thursday, November 5th, hopefully your week next week, as we get through the voting cycles, start to calm down. We've got one that I think is going to be an interesting one for a lot of folks, right? Enabling a secure and productive workforce, and really how to use Microsoft and services that eGroup provides to be able to really enable a productive workforce, right? As we've seen this year, it's been a struggle for a lot of customers. It's been a struggle for a lot of folks to get through this time and really have that remote workforce and remain productive and remain secure. So what can we do to utilize Microsoft technologies as well as eGroup services in this area to help you as an organization really enable that from a secure and productive workforce? So thank you for your time today. Happy to answer any more questions from a follow-up, or happy just to have general conversation around this later. So thank you for your time today. Hope you have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and thank you for joining us this morning.